So moving on to our first panel discussion of the day. The topic is academic excellence and employability. Can universities deliver both? So let's invite the moderator for the panel discussion 1. Please join me in welcoming Professor Jayanti Ranjan, Vice Chancellor, Sharda University, Agra. Along with that, we have powerful panelists. Let's welcome Dr. Murari Lal Gaur, Vice Chancellor, Dr. C.V. Raman University, Patna. Up next, we have Mr. Pankaj Jain, International Education Advisor. Dr. Jayavant Sheller, Vice Chancellor, ITM Skills University, Navi Mumbai. Up next, we have Mr. Yashpal Singh Kanwar, Vice President and Dean Executive Education, GIMS Rohini. And lastly, we have Dr. Manoj Kumar, President, Singhania University, Junjuru. Let's have a huge round of applause for our panel right here.
Namaste, pranam to everybody. My name is Jayanti Ranjan, as introduced by her. I am the Vice Chancellor of Sharda University, Agra. It's a privilege. Without wasting much time, I will request the panel members to briefly introduce about themselves as well as the university they belong to. Over to you, sir.
Should I start?
Of course, yes. Let's be terse. Let's be a little brief.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Manoj Kumar. I'm a retired civil servant. I retired from the Indian Administrative Service, and now I'm president of Singhania University. In Rajasthan, they call the Vice Chancellor. The designation used for the Vice Chancellor is president. Thank you very much.
Hello, good morning to all of you. I am Dr. Jayavant Sheller, the Vice Chancellor, ITM Skills University. I am having an experience of 34 years in education sector and have established 12 institutions across India in the area of management, hospitality, health science, law, architecture and design and media. Thank you.
Good morning everybody, I am Pankaj Jain. I have been into international education for the last 26 years. I was Director of University of Leeds UK and recently Director of UTS College Australia. I have been a consultant also. So my skills are in partnership, T&E's, recruitment.
I'm a big data professor basically. I'm a business school professor. And before taking over as a Vice Chancellor 3 years ago, I worked in IMT Ghaziabad, top 10 business school in India for 15 years.
I am Dr. M.L. Gaur. I am a converted academician. I was for 40 years in Government of India, Government of Gujarat. Then I can say, till today I am not, but I was Vice Chancellor, Dr. C.V. Raman University, and I am for a new job from tomorrow. So, I am a doctor in hydrology from IIT Roorkee, 30 years back, 95. That's it. Thank you.
I am YPS Kanwar and I come from Jagan Institute of Management Studies, GIMS Rohini. Originally from the industry, ONGC, with about 35 years in ONGC, and then come to the academics. It's a pleasure to be in a different arena, and new learnings automatically flow from the academy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'll give you just a quick background before I give the questions to them. When we talk about employability, every academic institution, every education institutions, they are into NEP, they are into innovation, and they do a lot of things what other institutions are doing. But we here to understand how different they are towards employability and skill management. So my first question goes to you only, sir, because you are coming from industry. We see often in any other education institutions, faculty are not given training in industries. We talk about practicality, we talk about experiential learning. Do you think that it's time that Government of India or the education institution boldly should take some steps where faculty can have an immersion, a month or so in an industry and come back, sir, that will have some enhancement towards student skills?
Thank you, ma'am. India is at the cusp of a great success, provided the quality of education improves. The demographic dividend today stands in our favor. We have a huge population, if we can convert that population to a quality product and services, we have done our jobs. Regarding the immersion programs, I was heading the petroleum sector committee on the industry academy interface. One of the topic was that, while the in foreign countries, academicians do go to the industry, acquire certain immersion experience, and one month or 2 months time, they come back to the academia, plow back the knowledge and new learnings that the industry is conducting back to the academia, and automatically that upgrade the skill of the students and the faculty themselves. Now there is a scope for this. This happens in most of the advanced countries, where the academicians are given opportunity by the industry. The responsibility center always has to be, in this case, the industry, which has to have the ownership to groom the faculty to meet their expectations. Because ultimately these products are going to come to the industry. And proactively you can do that job, it is wonderful. So there is a need, and I think from the academia side, we need to have the KPI and KPIs defined for the academicians also, so that every year or alternate year they are able to go to the industry, acquire some experience and come back.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I'll add on actually, because the PhD programs in West side, if you see, the industries hand over those PhD programs to academic institutions, and fantastic PhDs with patents and Nobel Prizes come. In India, the PhD programs are self-created in the education institutions, which is not sponsored by industry. So that takes me another clue to ask you, Professor Pankaj Jain, that you are into international international exposures and NEP and all, you must be acclimatizing. Since because how much internalization is required in India, particularly with respect to NEP, who are our customers? Are the students customers? Are the industries our customers? What is your take on it? I will add on to you.
Thank you, madam. I feel personally like with the NEP coming in, there are a lot of options which are open now. You can do partnerships, twinning programs, articulations, TNE programs. You can open campuses, international campuses. 13 have been allocated, and one two are already in GIFT City, Gandhinagar, one in Delhi of Southampton University. More are coming up in Hyderabad, Bombay. Bombay has created a specific zone for education. So NEP gives a lot of positive points for Indian institutes also to collaborate and do joint ventures. Like Chandigarh University had done a joint venture called Daskalo to come up campuses in Bombay with Emeritus. So similarly, a lot of options are available. Now it is for the Indian institutes to go out, seek challenges and do partnerships.
So would you like to do an add-on?
Sir spoke about the international. Let me tell you something about the national one, which is in India. We are a skill university, and when madam said that whether the student should be considered as a customer or the industry as a customer. So when I think about it, as per us, as per the university, we think that the customer is the product, wherein the curriculum and the pedagogy, when we contributed, we transform the students and make their services available to the industry. Thus, the industries are customer.
Okay, we'll take
That's what we think. And let me give you an example how we work on it. Our curriculum is designed by the industry professional, as 40% of them are there, 60% of them are the academicians in our board of studies, academic council and governing board. And our pedagogy is on a skill-based, activity-based learning, project-based learning and so on. When I say this, when the students, when we try to find out that how industry is relevant to us or how industry becomes a customer for me. So our management did had a word with at least 200 CEOs all over India, and they found that 2 months internship, 3 months internship doesn't work out, and they are not able to find out the students how they perform. And that is where it came. They say that for a board of studies, you should have the industry guys, those who are at a supervisory level, to tell us that what is the inputs required. Academic council at a managerial level and at a governing board level, the CEO level should do that. That is how we found at the industry level throughout the pedagogy, throughout the internship and so on. And that is where our university tagline goes as, where industry meets education.
So next question to you, so because you are also an IAS retired person, I know very well how that confluence of ideas can come into an education institution. But my query is something like this. Most of the faculty, including me, we go attend conferences, workshops, seminars. But practically just going on paper presentation, coming back, earning a certificate, getting a patent or a PhD add-on publication. Beyond these conferences, workshops and seminars, from practical point of view, what else faculty can actually imbibe? Because industries are not sponsoring too much research in a realistic way. If you ask me how much percentage, 25% of education institutions will be getting funding. So my question to you would be, sir, beyond these type of events, where else the knowledge through transfer, the exchange of transfer for faculty can come? Second is, I'm just add on to it. You see, non-teaching staff in education institutions is actually ignored by us. All of us are vice chancellors, we were professors, we were assistant professors, we were associate professors. What exactly should we be giving in them a role, a recognition, and upskilling for a non-teaching staff, be it be a lab assistant, be it be a library in charge, or anybody who is there in the examination department? How exactly education institutions should take care of those non-teaching staff?
Thank you, madam. You see, during you mentioned that I'm a retired bureaucrat. Yes, during my service career, I headed the Directorate of Technical Education and Training for Delhi government for 3+ years. And during that period, we could create an ecosystem where industry was welcome. So normally, I'm talking of a government setup. I'm talking of a government institution. Government institution, the attitude of teaching and non-teaching staff is that once you get the job, you get it done. So, to motivate them to collaborate with the industry, for doing that, industry is very much keen to collaborate because they need the manpower, trained as per their requirement. And most of the people who are being trained by us, the academia, are not as per industry standards. We are way behind. So if we have to catch up with the industry, we have to bridge that time lag when the student passes out and becomes industry ready. So for that, we need to collaborate with the industry from day one when the student is admitted, as sir said, in the syllabi, in the pedagogy, in the teaching methodology and the equipment. We may allow the syllabus to take a little rest. Syllabus too will be covered. The university or the prescribed mandatory credits will come, but they should get the practical knowledge and on the latest most machines. Go and do an audit of most of the government or private institutions even. We are still teaching on lathe. I am not saying lathe is irrelevant. But today is the world of CNC and advanced machines and all AI enabled. So that training can come from the industry only. The teachers, they should be trained in the industry. It should be mandatory. It should not be individual driven. It should be system oriented so that the teacher is pushed out of his comfort zone, go and gets trained in the industry, then comes back and teaches his students. So that knowledge, that is how we can escalate this.
So you mean to say more industry interaction for faculty, where the education institutions...
No. Faculty, they have to be sort of acting as mentors. First upgrade their own knowledge, then pass on that knowledge to the students. That is the essence.
Thank you. So my question to you, in any education institution, be a kind of a engineering autonomous institution or an education university, I'm not talking about elite clubs. tier 1 or tier 2 universities. I'm talking about tier 3 and tier 4, where they are looking forward to this ranking race that we are talking about. How exactly the technology plays into role. Some of them will be having, they have their own ERP mechanism. Some may be procuring very high cost softwares for student management, student services. What do you think for employability, how technology beyond curriculum, what sir was talking about, OBE, outcome based education. What do you think, where exactly technology should infuse more?
It's a very big and very integrated question. You have all, yes, tier 2, tier 3 or even lower cities or universities, they have their own problem. They are located at a place where sufficient information is not there, sources are not there. But they should not be rated inferior. They are located at grassroots levels, where traditional wisdom, traditional knowledge is there. I am giving an example. Nalanda versus Oxford. Nalanda was established before Oxford, and the knowledge and wisdom that exists there was underrated. And Oxford copied the Nalanda. So I would like to say one thing is that one discipline is not sufficient. We must have reinforcement of all decisions. The STEM education, say physics, chemistry must be the part of that. Say a building is there. Only sand cannot make a building. You have to have many elements in that. So now time has come where the expertise of tier 2, tier 3 cities in their own areas must be integrated into so-called developed institutions like IIT, IIM, whatever. You know, IIT, IIM are famous because of their brand, not because of their talent or because of their HR. They have got a platform, isn't it? So we have to consider all the experts, HR and institutions of all the tiers at the same level. They are getting top students of 90% marks. We are getting students of 30% marks. So we are grabbing them and they are polishing which are already polished. So we have to make integration of such kind of knowledgeful, maybe HR, maybe institutions. We have to integrate the subjects all together. See, time has come. When I joined PHU, a person was doing PhD in civil engineering. He was the MA history. MA history can do civil engineering PhD to prove Ganga is a living system. So time has come where all the subjects must be converged together and let us have problem-oriented kind of philosophy or policy. This is my rough expression.
What I was thinking, the government of India should come forward, should give a universal ERP type of system for those in tier 3, tier 4 institutions to support where they are unable to invest with respect to cost. Government, anyhow freebies are coming, another education freebie should be coming for them to utilize such software.
No, good things are done, sir. You know, madam, now accreditation is gone. Now there is no A plus, AP, A plus, all is gone. You are accredited or not accredited. So that's a very good thing that we can get survival of those tier 2, tier 3 organizations.
My next question to the, where you have got expertise in international exposure. Most of us know very well NPTEL, Swayam, MOOC programs are part and parcel where UGC is talking about at least 40% you can imbibe where the teachers can also be involved. Tell me, how exactly this employability skill is actually connected to, we don't have any index that after passing through 5 MOOCs or 10 NPTEL or 16 Swayam courses, we are all equipped with high skills. How exactly these measurements university do as a metric or a rubric? Do you have some live examples, sir? Do you know international education institutions who have that type of online MOOC courses where they are able to assess the skills of a student after going through it? Any ideas, any rough case studies?
Regarding this MOOCs or certification, we have the certification courses for all the programs. Regarding employability, I will say it in a different way. For example, we have an hotel management programs wherein the students after the first semester, they go for an internship on weekends, Saturday, Sunday to the 5-star properties. And this continues till the 3rd year, till the time they pass out.
That's a skill university. What is a skill university?
So wherein the students get an experience of the last 3 years, the properties also knows about the students that they are there with them for the 3 years. That helps them to get a pre-placement offer when they pass out. Number 1. Number 2 is, we ask for example, for a management student, they have an internship of 5 months. And when they have a 5 month internship, we ask the faculty also to visit them every fortnight. And with this, if a faculty gets 5 students with them, with the 5 organizations, they get a versatile experience of the industry, what is going on in the industry. They talk to the supervisor, they try to find out what is the requirement. And that is how it helps us to design the program where it becomes an employee.
Okay, the
Now
skill
this
gap, let me convert.
now I come to measure it. How do we measure it? The student at the end of the internship, they are supposed to submit the project report. This project report is evaluated by an industry guide, 50 marks, by a faculty guide, 50 marks, and the project report will get 50 marks. And when students appear for a viva, there is another 50 marks. So it is all 200 marks evaluation, wherein the students are being found at what exactly they do it in the industry. They can identify those gaps, they can work on it, and that is where it helps those marks help them to perform well during their interviews, and that experience helps them to become more employable compared to the
I'll put it in a nutshell. You mean to say these SWAYAM NPTEL courses are actually used for identifying skill gaps, where your faculty will be filling those skill gaps by interacting with the industry, right? I'll put it in a sentence. Now, add on you would like to do it, yes, go ahead.
Two small points. One is if we are to make these students employable, it's a huge challenge because to be honest, at least 60 to 70% students are not readily employed. It takes time, and that is why the organization don't want to invest in their training programs. A program like, for example, National Law College. Now, after every 4 months, there is a 2-month internship. So, in a period of 5 years, they have 10 internships. Programs like our programs will have to be revamped to include more and more internship so that industry interface comes in. Secondly, my practical experience as Director HR of Trident Group of Companies, summer internship, for example, in the management is very important, management courses. So we used to hire students at a very, very high package, internship. Good student, after a lot of interviews, discussions and all those things, say we have 40 students from all across the country, best of the students, pay them a hefty stipend. Suppose their salary would be, for example, that time 2 lakh rupees starting salary. They would be getting 70,000, 75,000 as a stipend per month. And in that time, the organization has an opportunity to look forward to not only their competencies but also the softer part of the skills, whether they employ or not. So this other part, the software part is equally and in fact sometimes more important.
Okay.
Other things we can do.
Okay, I'll move on to another question.
You have asked one very important question
Yeah.
that remains still unanswered.
Huh?
I'd like to answer that.
Non-teaching.
Some example, of the world example.
Okay.
There are many examples. I am giving 2 examples. One is advanced country and one is most small country, Netherlands. They have taken a 3-tier model where the curriculum of the university is decided by industry, university and government, dividing the courses in 3 parts. 30% yours, 30% is mine. This is one example from advanced. Then Bhutan. Bhutan has come where the local villagers and spiritual context are bringing into the academics and curriculum, and they are devising degrees accordingly. So these are the 2 innovative things.
I think the accreditation also gives us how do you take up feedback from students, alumni, parents as well as industries, and we do being academicians. Okay, my next question.
Can I just add, like, in India, I think I felt like we are very obsessed, parents, students, with what is the package a student gets. Like 10 lakh to 50 lakh, average salary, then 1.2 crores, Google pays. But if you go to top universities across the world, US, Canada, UK, nowhere we sell a university on the basis of the salary package of a student. We only sell on the ranking of US and other.
See, India is a price conscious market. I'll give the question to you itself because of the add-on. The student on an average, how much he can spend for his master's, MBA or MCA or MTech, he can spend maximum. He will not be spending more than that. With the price conscious market, with the so-called keyword placements, kitna milega, package kitna milega, the faculties and education institutions are striving hard to come into that and you have marks for it. You have some parameters for it. Now tell me, the question to you is that postdoctoral fellowships are very much prominent in abroad, where the faculty are sent by industries, where the industries imbibe this postdoctoral. Tell me, among our own faculty colleagues, how many of us are postdoctoral fellows? That postdoctoral fellowship is not given much prominence in India barring IITs, right? Or very refereed institutions. So what's your take on it, sir, when you compare with international education institutions in this one?
No, I remember like I was a student in MBA in 1996. We had my batchmates from India were 6 who are doing postdoc. So postdocs is very prominent in UK and other countries where the universities give fellowship also, they get earn also, and that is the route for becoming assistant professor in university. Here also we should give that option to students so that we increase.
Okay, my next question to both of you, and both of you should take on. You see, in education institutions, if you ask me honestly, BSc Chemistry, BSc Physics, BSc Mathematics, nobody is taking admissions. Let me tell you, even the mechanical engineering EEE specialization has gone for a big toss, and so is civil engineering. I am practically talking about as a vice chancellor. I think most of the vice chancellor will echo. Now, what will happen to those professors who are in chemistry, physics, mathematics, and because of this, their pay band disturbs with respect to computer science, artificial intelligence, data science. Me being a big data professor, I am talking about. Let's be very practical as academicians. What exactly education institutions towards employability? That's the topic. Let's connect to it. This, dying streams, dying departments. How a vice chancellor or a president or a chancellor should give a hope to those streams and hope to those faculty also. You please give me answers, sir.
It's a very sensitive question. And I'm again giving an example of a building. In a brick reinforcement, some steel rod is there, that is the reinforcement. In any education system, these primary subjects of physics, chemistry, environment, they works like a reinforcement of the whole structure. If your reinforcement is poor, your structure may be of whatever quality, it will demolish. So one example is there, Supreme Court given in 2011 a decision that environmental education must be a total inevitable part of the education system. So they have to start environmental science. Now, at this stage, not a single policy of government can be cleared unless environmental expert is there. So this is a way where the basic sciences must get incorporated in the all engineering.
So you mean to say they should invest only in research? In other
No,
words?
sir. They must come as a fabric part of every subject. Without chemistry, chemistry doesn't mean a pollution. Chemistry can be a pollution free. It can be a green chemistry.
How about you, sir?
I would say that I would call it a disruption. See, the way the technology is changing. We are seeing that हमने कंप्यूटर का बड़ा भारी मिशन बनाया, 20 साल में बड़ी एम्प्लॉयमेंट निकली, आज कंप्यूटर सब नीचे बैठ गया, आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस ले गया. जो ये डिसरप्शन आती रहेंगी, this is a disruption for these basic subjects also. Now, it is the onus is on them. Those teachers, they have to skill up their skill set. Nobody is stopping them to be the placement officer.
So I interpret it's a voluntary way of, adding their own knowledge.
Yes, madam, otherwise you will become unemployable. आप MSc केमिस्ट्री करके PhD केमिस्ट्री करके आपका जॉब नहीं लगेगा unless you upgrade and show that you can do.
How do you deal in your institution, sir?
No, we are giving them multifarious duties. Somebody is placement officer, somebody is industrial relations.
They take diverse portfolios,
Yeah.
you mean to say. Okay.
Yeah.
Taken. My next question to you, sir, because it's a skill that will come back to you again. You see, when we talk about student services, DSW, student council, everywhere we are there. And given the recent mental, anxiety, suicides that are happening, everybody are talking into, we are into a happiness center, we are creating a happiness quotient, we are giving a complete student services. Everywhere yoga is incorporated, meditation is incorporated, very well, which we study in almost all media outlets and public. But every institution's student services is different from any other institution because they have their own USPs. I would like to know if skill is to be given a prominence, employability is to be given a more prominence, how exactly student services, wellness, mental health will take a prominent space in the employability. मतलब जैसे उसको प्लेसमेंट मिलने के बाद भी उसके मेंटल स्ट्रेंथ अच्छा होना चाहिए. 25 लाख की प्लेसमेंट मिल गया है, बाद में जाके उसको डिप्रेशन आ रहा है, 90% है उसका. ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए. So how exactly you view in a skill path a road can be created towards mental wellness?
Madam, this we have seen it couple of decades back. This is where what is going to happen or what is going to be there in the industry. There is a stress level, there are the targets, there are demanding working hours, work-life balance for the females. There are a lot of things which are coming up. Those are on the one end where after they pass out, but while pursuing the program, they are having the peer pressure, marks, getting a placements. That's the other end. The third one is how do we go about it? So what we did initially, we started a lifestyle management program. So initially when this lifestyle management program was started, the students were not responding up to the mark. Chalo yoga hai, kar lenge, dekhenge, and all those things were going on. But then what we did in the subsequent year, we made it as a part of a curriculum and a compulsory credit course. That is where a student has to attend the classes, 90% of them. They have to undergo continuous evaluation. Every session will be evaluated out of 10 marks. So 10 sessions, 10 marks, they need to get evaluated. So that made them mandatory to go for it, complete it, certify it and go through it. That helped them. Besides that, we had a counselor who students can meet them during the working hour, tell them, express them what are their issues. We have a mental counselors and those people, the counselor comes, they have a very specific hours, 5 to 6 hours they are there. Students meet them, they discuss their issue and get it clarified. If required, we need to take it to the next level, to the doctors or so. That is from there. Now, but what do you do for the students to get a placement? So we are emphasizing on the soft skills.
Okay. What I'm saying is that if every education institution talking about glossy and rosy pictures of the students that they are actually progressing, then every education institution honestly must be producing Einsteins, which we are not. That's why we are talking about very bluntly that how exactly futuristic employability will be applied.
I'll come to that. So in soft skills, what we do is, there are two things where NEP has stated, skill enhancement and ability enhancement. So in skill enhancement, we ensure that they should be familiar with the advanced Excel, advanced Word, and we are asking them to go under the Cambridge English linguistic programs too, certification one. They have to undergo analytical and logical reasoning. The reason it is they have to appear for them as a career support to be employable. They are supposed to appear for them.
Yeah, I got your point. So I'll take the next question
Yeah.
to you, sir. Then both of you can answer because it's a very tricky question. Everybody have incorporated NEP. Everybody are into incorporating NEP, ability enhancement courses, skill enhancement courses and all. But tell me, if the education institutions are not incorporating NEP, do we have an annual NEP conclave, annual NEP conferences, any awareness program, and how NEP is actually directly has promoted employability and skills? And please give some examples and quote some live cases.
See, the new policy envisages to balance the academic requirements of the students, at the same time skill enhancements. And it gives different pathways midstream to change the directions as well. That is right, whereas a wide sort of spectrum of courses that one can offer. So it is not that a chemistry person cannot offer get a psychology course. If they are interested, they can do that. So the quality will improve if the people are working in their interest area. And this is one facilitative factor which will help these students.
See, this NAP is not totally understood. 5 years has gone. What I meant to say, old versus new. You know, Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee was the youngest Vice Chancellor of the country at the age of 35 years, 40 years. He made a principle known as Ashta Siddhanta, 8 principles of education. If you compare the Ashta Siddhanta of Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee minus NEP equal to 0. This is total what was said earlier, but we are not properly understanding it. So that's why NEP, making a program of conclave of NEP will not solve the problem. We have to make the marriage of tradition and technology. The traditional knowledge, the indigenous IKS system and modern system must get integrated and married. Then only it is successful. Thank you.
Question to you. There are a lot of international campuses that have come up, and we are also seeing a lot of surge in campuses. You being exposed to those international arena, could you please tell me beyond the faculty exchange program, student exchange program, double degrees, what else the new innovation can happen with respect to foreign universities coming and adopting our syllabi and curriculum?
Madam, with the foreign universities campuses which have come up, like we have in Gift City, Gandhinagar, Deakin University, Bologna University, Southampton has come up in Gurgaon also, and you are coming up. One is like faculty will get exposed because they will have 50-50 foreign faculty, 50 domestic. The deans of the schools or the directors are coming from abroad, only based in India. So you can get a lot of enhancement of curriculum also. The teaching content can also change, like domestic universities will look at what foreign universities are teaching. There will be option to do faculty exchange also. There is an option also that students can go abroad for 1 year, 1 semester also. So a lot of options are open with all these campuses which are coming up. Though they are very small campuses, 1 floor, 2 floor right now, but maybe in the next 5 years, 10 years.
It's a question to you. I'll come back to you. Both of you can answer. This is related to IKS. Now UGC has made it mandatory, and we are all very happy to adopt IKS. It's talking about adopting the Sanatani principles inside the curriculum. How do you progress, grow collectively, all these things. Now when you see IKS particularly, everybody has got their own way of giving as a course, giving as a center, giving as a certificate program. How do you see IKS in future in next 5 years, taking where the more ranking points are given to IKS, or do you think that it will be a part of just another course and center?
No, I think we should integrate IKS. You will be a rootless wonder without IKS.
Okay.
We have to be sticking to our roots. That is our USP. And I mean, nothing stops us from acquiring the knowledge, whatever, but we should know our roots, and Indian knowledge system provides the roundity. We are not totally aligned, alien to our upbringing. So that connectivity Indian knowledge system establishes, and I think we should stick to it. And I see that in the next 5 years, it's the engagement with IKS will increase. We are also entered into an MOU with the Art of Living Foundation, and we regularly invite their faculty to teach our teachers and students. That kind of engagement we want.
I got you.
Yeah.
My next question is for both of you, sir, because you see a very important point I would like to make. Not all institutions will have a student quality of 90% and above, CAT, MAT or UG also. You have to serve to the low strata because you have to keep GER into mind. You have to take care of even rural students also. But the expectation even from the chancellors, even from the vice chancellors, we want the moment students come in as an input, the student should go with a 20 lakh package, 30 lakh package, where we put this type of pressure naturally because we want students to grow holistically. In practicality from X, as he comes in from education institution, a B school or an autonomous school, when he goes out to X plus Y plus Z, this does not happen. Sometimes the skills remain same only, maybe X plus Y he may be there. So my question to you will be, do you think that the higher education institution, it's time they create a scorecard, an academic index that जब बच्चा आता है इनपुट एडमिशन में नेक्स्ट लेवल में है उसका पूरा डेमोग्राफिक डेटा सोशियोग्राफिक डेटा साइकोग्राफिक डेटा सब लिया एकेडमिक्स फर्स्ट सेमेस्टर में पढ़ा X+1 बना X+2 बना X+3 बना बीटेक पूरा कंप्लीट करने के बाद X+10 हो गया. Do you think that education institutions need to have this type of scorecard so that realistically it's a mirror to the employers also, mirror to the higher authorities also, mirror to the ranking agencies also, slow, fast learner, how he has transformed from a slow learner to fast learner. Do you think that these indexes should be must going forward?
Madam, usually we have three categories of students. Those who are scoring less than 60%, those who are between 60 to 80%, those who are 80 to 100%. And as Madam has said that 80 to 100%, we don't need to do anything. The challenge is where 60 to 80 or 40 to 60%. Whereas what we perceive or what we think as an institution is, when you are thinking as a 60 to 80% scoring mark, what are the skills they need? Basically, they are street smart guys, and usually what we had observed, what I had observed in last 3 decades, the first class graduates, those who are between the range of 60 to 80%, they get placed more preferably than the students those who are having more than 82%. Because 80 to 80 to 90%, they have decided that I will go for this state of this type
My
of.
question is, do you have a rubric or index?
I'll come to that. And then 40 to 60% what Madam said that about that the students, where do they stand? So we have a course in all the semester, it goes from the first semester onwards till the last semester. They have a soft skills, they have a life skills, and they have been trained and they have been shown that what are the slow learners. For example, for my BTech students, they can take a surprise test where students, faculty gets a report that where do they stand. Because it's an online, they have a 3 categories, whether they are an average, below average or moderate, or they are the advanced learner or they are a very good scoring one. So those who are opting for that surprise stage, we come to know if they are the average, they are going for an easy mode. There are 3 levels, easy, moderate and tougher level. If they go for easy, they can't crack the moderate. That is an alarming stage for a faculty in the 4th session that they should work on. That is
Okay. What your university said?
University is doing very good work because it is located at a place which is deprived of all the facilities, say Nalanda and Vaishali in Bihar. But the concept is changing. Our perception must be changed. Student must not get degree for marks, not take degree for the employment. He should be job giver, not job taker. If you can create some skills in that, he can create his own industry, he can create the jobs. So the concept of that I am university to get the job or to get the marks itself is wrong. You must make them very much capable so he can create. Example is Big Basket. Big Basket, chief of that, he was my 10 years junior to my same college. He was not able to get the job. He was seeing the vegetable markets to sow the vegetables, and now he is Big Basket. So anything can convert into your employment giving kind of condition rather than employment seeking kind of condition. So by skill investment, by startups, those things must be the priority for the universities rather than going blindly behind the marks 80%, 90% or employment. That's my view.
If I take up the confluence of these 2 inputs we have given, I think education institutions are not having any rubrics or any scorecard per se for students. They have not developed on their own. I think it's time for education institutions to develop that. The student X पे आया था, जब जा रहा था वही पे गया है बोल के ऐसा कोई rubrics नहीं, हाँ वो नहीं था, एक benchmarking नहीं है अभी तक. Okay sir, I'm coming back to you now. The question, I'll add on to you. You see, industry integration, everybody are talking about. From AICT days, that 3 decades ago, everybody talks. Still, there is a gap between industry and institution. But my question is different, sir. In the era of chat GPT, preparing the PPTs, and students also writing nice emails, faculty writing nice emails using GPT. Whether they speak or not, I do not know. Their emails are very nice, fantabulous. How do you think the new age teaching and learning, how do you expect these teachers to have an industry integration? How industry people will see this?
Ma'am, having added that particular group, actually, about the public sector enterprises of the oil sector, the major problem is that both are living in their silos. Academics lives in their own silos and industry lives in own silos. And both of them think that while they know everything, the other person doesn't know. This was the trend. This was 2012. Things have changed. Because the problem is that the industry feels कि model बना के सिखा देता है, पढ़ा देता है, लेकिन output वो कहता है output तो आ रहा है, ये model को क्या करूँगा मैं? There is a problem, disconnect. But at the same time, unless they work together, and all developed countries they are working together. Unless they work together, you can't plow back the deliverables to the academia unless they work. So even in this time of chat GPT, for example, there is nothing wrong with using chat GPT. In fact, if you use it in the right way, with the right intent, ethically,
Okay.
उसको अगर value add करने के लिए use कर रहे हैं तो कोई दिक्कत नहीं. but don't make it the master and become the slave.
Okay, 1 minute is there, so I'll ask one question to everybody. They'll give a binary answer, right? Professor of practice, which UGC says and everybody says. Have you appointed? How many, if so?
We have 2 of them.
Okay.
Yes.
How about you, sir? Skill University.
We have 3 of them, but we have a guest lecture visiting faculty from the university.
Okay. Do you believe in POP? No, because you come from a different arena. How about you? How about you? Because professor of practice is one arena where the UGC has given you the right spirit, but most of these professor of practice, they do not place their students, they do not bring industry interaction or internships. There is still gap is there with respect to gap. So it's almost we're out of time. Thank you very much.
Chat GPT.
Chat.
You know, and AI. The name itself is wrong. AI should not be AI. It should be AHI. Artificial Human Intelligence. Chat GPT can provide you answers. Only answers, not question. Question has to be generated from here. Whatever question you put, it will answer. So your prejudice is totally wrong. It's a human who is the intelligent. It's a human who is giving you questions. If question is good, answer is good. If question is bogus, garbage in, garbage out. So it should be human based intelligence.
ऐसा कुछ नहीं सर, मैं बिग डेटा प्रोफेसर हूँ. AI का बड़ा टर्म है. डीप लर्निंग अलग है, मशीन लर्निंग अलग है. डीप लर्निंग का एल्गोरिथम्स अलग है, मशीन लर्निंग का एल्गोरिथम्स अलग है. एक कॉमन यूजर के लिए वर्ड आया है, बट देयर आर very good models available. Thank you very much, academicians and industry practitioners who have listened very patiently for our rapid fire question and answer taking. I'm very much offering my gratitude to all the people. They were very altruistic, very effusive, all the colleagues, and they have given me a very nice answer straight from the heart, no more fake way of giving. So I'm very much offering my gratitude to all the panelists, and thank you very much for patiently listening to us. And we have taken as many out-of-box questions as possible, not the regular questions, which usually we don't get in any most tricky questions, and everybody tried to answer. And much gratitude to you, crowd. Thank you very much.
Thank you.